On the 18th of February 2026, the UK government struck a deal with the private marine and defence technology operator Inocea Group to sell two Royal Fleet Auxiliary fast tankers, RFA Wave Knight and RFA Wave Ruler. Removed from active service in 2017 and 2022 respectively, these 31,500-ton vessels spent years tied up in extended readiness, maintained in class but effectively useless to the Royal Navy. Rather than sending them to the scrapyard or selling them at a heavy discount to a South American navy, the Ministry of Defence opted for a commercial handover. Inocea will now reactivate both ships to full operational readiness, ensuring that they meet all class and flag state requirements to serve a completely new operational life. These vessels will not return to the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. They'll operate under a provision of services agreement leased out by Inocea to support allied navies globally. The sale forms a cornerstone of a sweeping defence cut package announced by the Defence Secretary John Healey, designed to generate £150 million in immediate savings over a 2-year period. Scrapping the maintenance, berthing, and preservation costs associated with these inactive hulls directly feeds into a broader government objective of clawing back £500 million over the next 5 years. The Treasury will retain these funds in full within the defence budget, redirecting the capital to modernise the active fleet and cover the expenses of new ships currently moving through the procurement pipeline. Yes, in an era where other NATO nations are significantly increasing their defence budget, the UK MOD is forced to look for scraps within its own budget. The Ministry of Defence sold two highly capable fleet tankers because it simply cannot afford to operate and crew them. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary is trapped in a systemic and worsening manpower crisis. Since 2003, the total number of hulls in the RFA has dropped by roughly 50%. Despite this contraction, the operational workload has intensified. The mostly civilian-crewed RFA ships frequently fill capability gaps left by a shrinking Royal Navy surface fleet, undertaken independent patrols, humanitarian relief missions, and counter-piracy operations that traditionally belong to frigates or offshore patrol vessels. The conditions for personnel operating these ships have severely degraded. Crews face increasingly long deployments, extended periods at sea, and heavily reduced time alongside in port. A government pay freeze dating back to 2010 hollowed out the workforce, leaving the RFA unable to offer competitive salaries. Highly trained mariners routinely leave the service for the commercial merchant navy, where pay rates and leave rotations reflect the realities of the private sector. This retention failure triggered industrial action over paying conditions, severely disrupting naval supply lines. The manpower deficit has effectively crippled the UK's amphibious and logistical capabilities. The amphibious assault ships Albion and Bulwark were withdrawn from service entirely at the end of 2024, driven heavily by the lack of available crew. RFA Fort Victoria, the UK's only fleet-solid support ship capable of providing the trials and ammunition necessary for a carrier strike group, sits in an uncrewed reserve status because there are no sailors to operate her. Holding the Wave-class tankers in extended readiness drained financial resources, while the RFA struggled to keep its primary assets at sea. Selling the Wave class to Inocea removes the crewing requirement from the state entirely, shifting the burden to the commercial market. Inocea's acquisition of the Wave class relies on a fully contractorized model for naval logistics. The company owns the ship, handles all the maintenance, and employs the core civilian crew. Allied navies then sign a provision of services agreement with the operator. The military client pays for guaranteed days at sea, fuel delivery volumes, and logistical support without taking on the massive capital expenditure of building a ship or the long-term pension liabilities employing the crew. The operational blueprint for this arrangement is already highly proven. Inocea, operating through its subsidiary Federal Fleet Services, runs the combat support ship MV Asterix for the Royal Canadian Navy. Asterix began its life as a German-built commercial container ship. In 2015, Inocea's shipyard in Quebec took the vessel and converted it to military specification in a rapid 18-month turnaround. The ship entered Canadian service in 2018 and has delivered a flawless operational record. She's logged over 245,000 nautical miles, executing more than 480 operations and calling at 20 different countries. She has operated alongside NATO forces across the globe, deploying to the Arabian Gulf, East Africa, and the South China Sea without a single day of unplanned downtime. The Canadian government views the model as a massive success. In 2024, they officially exercised the remaining 3 option years on the contract, securing the Asterix under the Provision of Services Agreement until at least the 28th of January 2028. Inocea will take this exact commercial framework and apply it to the Wave Knight and Wave Ruler, leveraging their existing infrastructure to provide turnkey logistical support to Allied forces. Inocea specifically stated that the reactivated Wave-class ships will support Allied navies facing identical pressures on their naval force structures. Whilst the company has not released a public list of the specific nations drafting contracts, the target demographic consists of NATO members and Western-aligned task forces trying to expand their expeditionary reach. Many European navies lack dedicated fast fleet tankers capable of sustaining long-range deployments. Procuring a brand-new supply ship is painfully slow. Current European naval shipbuilding projects require a minimum of 5 years from order to delivery. A reactivated Wave-class tanker provides an immediate off-the-shelf solution for states needing to bridge the capability gap. These vessels have a proven pedigree, having spent 2 decades supporting the British and NATO operations worldwide. Historically, the UK MOD previously offered to sell the Wave class to Brazil. Inocea will market the ships to this exact same type of Allied force, a navy that requires sovereign logistical reach but cannot wait half a decade for a domestic shipyard to build a hull. Deploying civilian crewed ships into combat zones creates legal liabilities. Under the international law of naval warfare, fleet auxiliaries actively supporting military operations are legitimate targets. Their crews risk attack without warning and lose their standard civilian protections if captured, becoming prisoners of war. Navies mitigate these risks through restrictive contracts and hybrid crewing. For example, the MV Asterix relies on 36 commercial mariners for navigation, while 114 embedded military personnel handles weapons, aviation, and tactical communications. Crucially, commercial contracts forbid these vessels from entering active war zones. Carrier strike groups must pull back to safe waters for replenishment or rely entirely on helicopters. Applying this model to the entire RFA would heavily constrain the Royal Navy's combat effectiveness. The RFA currently operates fully integrated into the Royal Navy's command and control system, providing a sovereign core that allows the fleet to act independently globally. If the RFA shifted to commercial agreements mirroring the Asterix, the Royal Navy would face major logistical fractures during high-intensity conflicts. Frontline warships and aircraft carriers would be forced to withdraw to refuel and rearm outside designated danger zones, immediately degrading the fleet's operational tempo. So, while this model solves peacetime current deficits, it fundamentally restricts the Navy's ability to project sustained, independent combat power under fire. The Ministry of Defense made a calculated decision to sell the 2 Wave-class ships while retaining the 4 newer Tide-class fast fleet tankers. The operational logic behind shedding the older platform heavily favors the newer hulls. Entering service in 2003, the Wave class requires a core crew of 80 personnel to manage a ship that tops out at 18 knots with a range of 10,000 nautical miles, carrying 16,000 cubic meters of liquid capacity. Holding these inactive vessels in reserve drained resources. Decommissioning them estimates the Ministry of Defense £4.5 million annually in maintenance. By contrast, the Tide class, entering service between 2017 and 2019, operates with a leaner core crew of just 63 personnel, despite its larger size. These highly automated ships deliver superior performance, with a top speed of 20 knots, a massively extended range of 18